Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video I'm very excited to do because I'm going to be finally playing with this new Anastasia Beverly Hills Nouveau palette, and I'm going to show you 4 looks, and this is going to be one of them, and I have all my thoughts for you if this palette is worth it and do you need it. If you like new makeup in-depth reviews, eyeshadow palette reviews and tutorials, give this video a like, and I invite you to join my YouTube family by clicking that subscribe button. And without any further ado, let's dive in. Before we get into the look tutorials, I would like to do a quick overview of the palette. This palette was just recently launched, and this is the outside packaging. The design of the outer packaging for this palette looks exactly the same. This palette priced is a little bit higher in comparison to the previous Anastasia Beverly Hills palettes of this kind. And if we compare the sizes, I just grabbed my Soft Glam to compare it to. Let's just put these together. It's almost the same size. It's just a little bit shorter and tiny bit more narrow. But the packaging does have a texture, and this is not a metal, this is just kind of like a golden painted embossing here. This packaging does have a texture, but it almost feels washable. It's no longer that velvet packaging like this type of palette, and I'm kind of happy about that. There is a full-size mirror. This is a 12-pan palette. 5 shades are mattes. These are the swatches on the palette. I want to say that all these shades swatch really nicely. I will go more in depth on each of the shades and their quality and the performance. At the moment, I do notice that there are different shimmer shades in this palette, and then some of the mattes seem to be more satin, like this shade right here, the shade Wisteria, which is that lilac shade, and these shades are a little bit more true to be matte, and then the shade Liberty felt the driest out of all of them. All these swatches were single swatches, and except this shade Fleur right here, Fleur, I should say, this is French, sound French. And then the shade Liberty, you can see it right here. This probably took me 3 times to pass, and this is what I achieved. So it definitely seems like it's the driest one out of the bunch. This video does have timestamps, so if you'd like to navigate through for inspiration through look tutorials, make sure to check out the timestamps, or you can go straight to the end for my final thoughts. So for this look number 1, I'm going to start with the shade Metro. I'm going to start stapling it into my crease like that, or just slightly above. This shade seemed to be pretty pigmented, and it does build up really nicely. Then I'm switching the brush to a smaller blending brush and I'm gonna pick up this shade Fleur. I'm gonna start blending out this edge just tiny bit and bringing it in a little bit more towards the inner corner, making this transition really nice and soft. These 2 shades blend into each other really nicely. Then I'm going to go back to the shade Metro where we started. I'm going to build up this area a little bit more, right into the crease. Again, stapling motions. I'm going in the shade Metro one more time, and I'm going to build up the lower lash line, connecting this to outer corner. Now I'm going in the shade Liberty with more dense brush, and I'm gonna only staple it into this outer corner right here. I'm gonna switch the brush to the flat blending brush and only blend out these areas on the edges. If you need, you can go back and forth between these 2 brushes and achieve the intensity of this outer corner. I am going into the shade Metro and just building up this color right here, so we're not losing that shade. Now I'm gonna take a flat brush and go into the shade Paloma, and I'm just placing it right under the brow. This shade does have a little bit of opacity, so it will definitely light up this area. If you feel like you over applied this transitional crease shades, this shade would definitely help you to clean out the area and lightening up. For my inner corner shade, I'm gonna go in the shade Isle, just placing it very, very precisely right in the inner corner. I don't want it to be lower or higher, I just want it to be right here. I'm stapling it in just like that. I'm taking my small packing brush and I'm going into the shade Liberty one more time. Just place it with the tapping motions right here on my lower lash line on the outer half, tying these outer V together. For my lid shade, I'm gonna go into the shade Lily. This shade seems to have a lot of texture. I'm picking up a lot on a brush, but I'm gonna go ahead and spray it. I'm just precisely putting it right here. I'm placing this color in my entire inner portion of my upper lid. This shade Lily is definitely more textured and it does have glitter particles. It is quite beautiful shade. It's very interesting, but it does have the most texture. I suggest it to be sprayed because that way you do not get fallout under your eye. At this point, you may want to choose to touch up your outer corner just for a better transition right here. So your shimmer shade and outer corner blend in nicely. You might want to just switch your brushes back and forth here and just make sure your blend is really nice and soft. This is the look without lashes. And this is the look with the mascara on. And these are all the 6 shades that I used for this look. Another small variation of this same look, which I personally would prefer for myself, to take the shade Lily and take it out over that matte outer corner, shade Liberty, and put it right over it with the tapping motion. As you see, it would still give you dimension and the shade will look different on its own versus when it's sit on the matte darker shade. It really does look like you put 2 different shimmer shades, but it's just one with a different base. For some reason, you guys, this shade keeps scrambling. I just lost another piece from here, so which is very unfortunate. So for this look, I'm starting with this first shade, Paloma. This shade is matte, however, it does have a very light satin effect. If you look at it up close, you will be able to notice that. From afar, at the first sight, it does seem to be a simple matte shade. A very small brush, and I'm gonna take the same shade Paloma, place it on my inner corner, and lighten up this area a good amount. As much as the shade allows me, place the shade not only on the actual inner corner of my eye, but also in this divot. I want this area to be a lot lighter and brighter. Next, I'm going to the shade Liberty, and I'm going to start placing it with the tapping motions into my crease and above, but not too high. I'm also gonna right away build up this outer corner. And then I'm taking a smaller flat brush and I'm applying the same shade Liberty on my lower lash line, trying to connect these areas right here. Now I'm taking a clean small blending brush and I'm going to blend out the edges, make sure everything is soft. I'm not any additional color. This is a clean brush with no color on it. And I'm just staying on the very outer portion of the shade that I just placed. And I'm trying to just diffuse it and make it look very like foggy and airy. So for some reason, I'm experiencing some patchiness here. I'm not sure why. You can do the same thing on the lower lash line. I had to go between my original first brushes and try to clean up this area. I think it looks okay. I still see a little bit of patchiness going on. I don't think this is eyeshadow fault. I think it's something going on with my texture of my eye here. Sometimes it does happen to me with eyeshadows. I think this eyeshadow formula is fine because everywhere else it built it up, it packed and it blended out really nicely, except this area. Next, I'm gonna take really small fluffy brush and go into this shade Muse. This shade seems to be pretty crumbly, so I'm gonna again spray it. And I'm going to strategically place it here on the outer corner because I just like a little bit more depth here and a little bit of a reflection just right here on the very outer corner. there's still fallout even after I sprayed it. And when I try to clean it up, you guys, the glitter that's in this shade unfortunately stays. But we're moving on. I am staying with the same shade. It's just this very small packing brush, and I'm just gonna tap it like right here. So this gives a little bit more dimension and brings a little bit of a reflection because this shade Muse is metallic. To finish off this look, I'm going into the shade Wings, and I'm picking it up with my brush. This seems to be a very soft shimmer shade. However, when I tap my brush off, there is still fallout. I'm gonna try to apply it on my lid without being sprayed. All right, it does the beautiful job applying it without being sprayed, as you can see. It's pretty opaque and it's very creamy. In person, it is pretty reflective. It does look like a full shimmer metallic. I don't think this is the best fully foiled metallic formula I've ever had. This is a very interesting shade because when I swatch it, it looks a little bit more like silvery metallic. Then in the pan, it does have a little bit of green undertone in it. So this shade actually does apply nicely with the brush. As you can see, it does also build up. I think this outer corner is a little bit too overpowering. So I'm actually gonna extend this shade Wings a little bit more on the lid, and it just create a little bit more of that outer V. This shade Wings actually packs really nicely on top of other shades with opacity. I'm going back with my very small blending brush. I like to blend in this area a little bit more so there's a little bit softer transition. And I'm going back into this shade Paloma, lightening it up this area a little bit. I want it to be a little bit brighter. To my waterline, I added this Catrice pencil, and here's the finished look with the mascara. My eye is start getting watery and irritated, so I'm going to try to be really gentle for this one. First, I'm going into the shade Paloma, placing it under my brow bone. Taking a very small brush and placing it also on my inner corner to the point until you can actually see the color stand out. Then I'm going in the shade Liberty. I'm going to start packing this shade right here. If you guys start seeing patchiness here, this is my irritated eye at this point, so disregard. I'm going with a clean small blending brush and just blending out this area. Kind of want to bring this portion of this matte shade to inside, but without adding color, and just diffusing this really nicely. I'm going into the shade Peacock. This seemed to have a lot of fallout and texture. I sprayed my brush and I am applying it just to this outer corner. I'm applying the same shade to this lower lash line. This is a beautiful shade, you guys. Now I'm going back into my blending brush, not picking up any color, but I would like to just diffuse and blend the outer portion of this metallic shade that we just placed into our matte area. Now I'm going into the shade Wisteria and applying it right here. It is buildable and it does have a satin effect to it. Back to the brush with the shade Peacock, and I would like to build up this area a little bit. These are the 4 shades that I used for this makeup look. I added liquid black eyeliner, mascara, and waterline pencil, and this is the final makeup look. Okay guys, time for final thoughts. What I like to talk about is the color story, the quality of the shades, and the value. Do you really need it? There are different shimmer formulations here, so let's start from that. The first 2 shades, Wings and Isle, they are the lightest 2 shimmers in the palette, and they seem to be perfectly performing with a brush without needing to be sprayed. So they seem to be fully pigmented and buildable. You can also use these shades as a single shadow. If you like that one single shadow eye look, or maybe throw an eyeliner, mascara, and you're good to go. The next batch of shimmer shadows is going to be Belle and Hope. They are also very fully metallic, but they seem to have a little bit more texture, and there will be a small amount of fallout on them. I do suggest you spray them before applying to your eyes. And then the third category of shimmers would be the shimmer Muse, Lily, and Peacock. All these three shades have more texture, more fallout, and have glitter in them. These shades definitely need to be sprayed, otherwise all of it is going to end up under your eye, not on your eye. This shade Muse is one of the deepest ones in the palette, so I would also treat it as a matte shade. Like, you would need something to darken your outer corner. That's what I would use, and that's what I did use in my looks today. The shade Lily is a very beautiful shade. It's very glittery, very textured. When you touch it with your finger, there's like chunks come out. The shade Peacock is very interesting because it is that beautiful duochrome. There is a lot of fallout on these shimmery shades. Do your looks first and then spray the brush. So as far as the fallout on the entire palette, this is Anastasia Beverly Hills palette, you guys. If you're familiar with the formula, ABH's eyeshadow formula is pretty softly pressed, and there's always a ton of fallout. Is this one any different? I don't think so. There is a ton of fallout. I found myself re-dipping into the pan multiple of times, especially when it comes to the mattes. We will get to that in a second. For the shimmers, it doesn't take that much because they're more pigmented, especially once you spray them. They're definitely more intense. I think I went into each shimmer maybe 2 times. Let's talk about the mattes very briefly. There are 5 mattes here, so I found that there are also 2 different kinds of mattes in this palette. The shade Paloma and Wisteria, they are satins. They're not true mattes, so they do have a very light sheen to them. The shade Paloma is interesting shade because it is brightening. Works very nicely for the inner corner, for the brightening and lightening of the inner corners. These 2 shades, they build up really nicely and they blend into each other really nicely. I had a little bit difficulty with this shade Liberty. I found it to be the driest out of all the matte shades in the palette. It took me the longest to build it up and the longest to blend. To my opinion, this matte shades are best applied when packed to the lid first and then blend it out. And you may need to go back and forth between brushes, like blend and build up, blend and build up. So do you need this palette? You absolutely need to love neutral, cool tones to like this palette. If you're a neutral lover, you might enjoy this just for every day. I think this palette can go grungy really easily because half of this palette is quite dark. Generally, my thought is this palette is very wearable. However, I did have a little bit of difficulty initially mixing up some shades and textures together. It took me a little bit of a time and thinking to figure out how I would like to mix up the colors together. But generally, I think that these shades are very technique sensitive. So here are some of my thoughts on this palette. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found this helpful. I hope it gave you some inspiration. If you did purchase this palette, let me know in the comments below if you did end up buying this palette or you just changed your mind. If you enjoyed this video, give this video a like, and I hope you consider subscribing to my channel before you go. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next videos. Bye.